Hey guys, I am getting ready to head out to a wedding. Yes, I have a wedding during the week, which is awesome. But I wanted to come live to you guys today to show you some of the stuff that I have in my bag when I go to a wedding. So more specifically, the lenses that I bring with me on a wedding day. I actually got some questions about this, so I thought this would be the perfect opportunity just to show you what I have in my bag before I go, how I use it, and some recommendations for what I think you should have in your bag too, whether you photograph weddings or portraits. I definitely have some top recommendations for what you should be shooting with. So I will show you first off, it's on my camera at the moment, but I shoot Canon, but regardless of whether you shoot Canon, Nikon, doesn't really matter. But this lens that I have on here is my 50 millimeter. For Canon, it's a 50 millimeter 1.2. It's a little pricey. I would say that this lens probably cost me around $1,500, but when you are working professionally, it's really important to have professional level equipment. You're providing a service to your clients, and in order to justify those prices, you not only have to give them a great experience service-wise, but you also have to have the equipment to back it up too. So it's not to say that you can't shoot professionally with equipment that is lesser expensive, but as you get on with your business, it is really good to upgrade to equipment that's going to last you a bit longer than some of the lesser expensive equipment. When I first started shooting professionally, I shot with a Canon Rebel with $100 50 millimeter 1.8 lens, and that did me fine for about a year, and then I had to start upgrading equipment because the longer you're in this business, the more you're going to be shooting and the more you're going to be using your equipment. You want stuff that's going to last for a long time. So the 50 millimeter, like I said, this guy, this is my go-to lens. I actually shoot with 2 cameras on wedding day, and the 50 millimeter typically never leaves my camera. That lens it's pretty similar to what your eye sees. So it's great for shooting details. It's great for portraits. Love it for portraits. It really is a super versatile lens that you can use for pretty much anything. Same thing on portrait day. That lens typically will stay on my camera for almost the entire shoot. So I never, ever, ever leave without that lens. So if you don't have a 50 millimeter lens, prime lens, so it's not a zoom lens, prime lens, you need to get one. So for those that may not know the difference between prime and zoom, a prime lens is just a lens that is the hey Laurel, that is the focal length, 50 millimeters, that's it. A lot of the Canon, and I'm sure Nikon too, come with stock lenses that'll be, you know, different ranges of focal length, but prime lenses are going to give you that big, wide open, beautiful, creamy bokeh in the background. They have the wider apertures, whereas the zoom lenses, not quite as much. So 50 millimeter, go buy it if you don't have it. Have to have it. The next thing that I have, and this is specifically for weddings, but I have a 100 millimeter macro lens. So this, honestly, I got the cheaper version of this. I think this macro is $500, which I know that's not cheap, but it is the cheaper version of the two. This one doesn't have the image stabilization, so it makes it a little bit harder to use, but I only use this for details. So doing those close-up shots of the rings and earrings, things like that, that's honestly only what I use this lens for. Now, I know that some people have used this lens for portraits. It's a really great lens for that. I don't typically use this just because I have another longer focal length lens that I like better. But a lot of people do use the 100 millimeter for portraits. It gives really nice compression in the background. So this is a good one to have, especially if you are if you're a wedding photographer, you need to have some type of macro lens for doing those wedding detail shots. So you don't have to purchase the 100 millimeter macro. There are adapters that you can purchase for other lenses. that you can convert them to macro. So I would check with B&H Photo or your local camera shop to see what's available for possibly some lenses that you already have, so you can just purchase the adapter and you don't have to purchase a lens. But if you're in the market for one, I recommend the 100mm macro. You can do the 100mm macro that has the image stabilization, but I think it's around $1,000 or $1,500 for that lens. So I say go with the cheaper one, but it does take a little bit longer to be able to focus this because it doesn't have the image stabilization. I manually focus this lens, so I do it with my hands. So it does make it a little bit more difficult, but for me, it just wasn't worth it to spend the extra money. Also, I have, let me grab this big guy. So I have the 70-200. This is the Canon version. All the Canon like longer focal length lenses are white. I don't know why. But the 70-200 is on my camera, on my second camera constantly when I'm doing portraits, and also during the ceremony. So I can get those really tight close-up shots of the bride and groom without having to be in their face during the ceremony, because nobody wants to see me during the ceremony. I need to be like in the background. So it is heavy, I will say, but it is beautiful. The compression on this is amazing. I use this all the time for family portraits. It's just such a gorgeous, gorgeous lens. So tons of portraits with this, but it's only gonna stay on my camera for the portrait time and the ceremony time during the day, and then it comes off because again, it is really heavy. And with carrying two cameras around, yeah, it does kind of hurt my back from time to time, but it is one of those lenses that you just absolutely have to have. So I want to say that this lens runs around 2,000. I'm not sure. This is the 70-200 2.8 with the image stabilization. You want the image stabilization on this particular lens. I think it's really important when you're shooting portraits. You have to have the anti-shake because you don't want the portraits to be blurry. So I also recommend, if you're in the market for this lens, you don't want to spend that much money buying it new. There are tons of Facebook groups of people that are selling equipment like this. There's a Canon buy sell group, and I'm sure they have it for Nikon as well. And I actually purchased this used, and I've been using it for years and never had a problem. But you can also go on to the Canon web to purchase refurbished equipment. So I definitely recommend doing that. So I would try that as well for the 70-200. And then the last one that I have is my 35mm, which I'm grabbing it right now. It's in my bag. This is a 35mm. This is 1.4. You don't have to do 1.4. I like for my lenses to have an aperture of 2.8 or larger as far as like how far open these are going to go. So anywhere from 2.8 to 1.2. I don't typically shoot with anything that is like 4.0, 5.6. I just don't shoot with them because they just don't let in as much light, and it's just not really conducive to my style of photography. So this I purchased from Canon. It was a refurbished lens, and I've had no issues at all. And I want to say that this one runs around maybe 1,200, not sure. But again, like, you can get a 35mm lens that isn't this expensive. You don't have to go this route, but I would say 2.8 is probably the aperture, the lowest that I would go with. But this I use for reception. All of my dancing photos, the 35mm is really great because I can get the whole group. I can be close up to people and get more of their whole body, get more of the whole group when I'm photographing. Also, like bigger group shots for bridal party or family, I'm using this 35mm lens. And then also, like, for getting ready photos, if I'm in a tight space, I'm going to use my 35 millimeter. And this one is also a prime lens. So out of all of my lenses, I only have one zoom lens, and that's my 70-200. That's the only one. My 35 millimeter, my 100 millimeter, and my 50 millimeter are all prime lenses. And you'll find as you shoot more with the prime lenses, really, they just let in so much more light. There is a significant difference between these and zoom lenses. So this is a big recommendation too. I do have an 85 millimeter. I have this on my, this is an 85 millimeter 1.8. This is the cheaper version. I think there's a 1.4 or 1.2 that runs around $1,800. This one was $500. This one is really great for portraits, and it's good for, you know, doing those closer up shots that you need, like during the reception. But the 70-200 isn't going to go as wide open in the aperture, so it doesn't let in as much light. So this keeps you from having to bump your ISO up too high or having to blast so much flash power. So I definitely recommend having this if it's, you know, if it's in your budget. I don't use it a ton. Like, honestly, it doesn't make its way onto my camera very often, but it is good for dark church ceremonies, whereas the 70-200 isn't as good in low light situations. But is a good one to have if you're looking to, like, you know, purchase a piece of equipment, you want like a luxury lens that makes life a little bit easier, then I would recommend the 85 millimeter. But that's basically it, guys. Those are all of the lenses that I carry with me to a wedding. For a portrait session, I'm probably not gonna bring my 85. I'm not gonna bring my 100 millimeter macro. I'm definitely 100% gonna have my 50 millimeter and my 70-200. I may bring my 35 just in case there's some wide angle shots that I wanna get, but I don't typically pop that on my camera unless I'm going somewhere that has really beautiful landscapes and I want to get like big, wide, what's the word I'm looking for, guys? Big, wide open, you know what I'm saying. I want to get the wide angle shots. Wide angle shots is what I was trying to say. So, yeah, so those 5 lenses, but definitely the 100, the 50, the 35, and a 70-200 for weddings. And definitely at least a 50 for portrait sessions. You can totally get away with that. So I hope this was helpful. If you guys have any questions, you can always shoot a question into the group, or you can send me an email directly or a message directly through Facebook Messenger. And if you would like to have more one-on-one time with me to chat about your photography business and how you can either improve technically, shooting wise, editing, or just growing your business and finding ideal clients, then absolutely shoot me a message and we will hop on the phone and we'll do a free coaching call and chat a bit about where you are and where you want to be. So I hope you guys enjoy the rest of your day, and I'll talk to you soon. Bye.